Hi, I am Leo. Welcome to Wiki for What? It is 2 in the morning. Your body is tired enough that it should have surrendered to sleep an hour ago, but your mind did not get the memo. It is replaying a conversation from Tuesday. It is drafting tomorrow's meeting in real time. It is wondering whether you locked the front door. And then, for about half a second, something shifts. You notice the thoughts, not the content of them, but the fact that they are happening. You catch yourself mid-loop, and for one moment, you are not inside the stream. You are watching it. Then the stream swallows you again. That half second was the most important moment of your day, and you almost certainly missed it. You do not run your own mind nearly as often as you think you do. That is not a metaphor. It is not a guilt trip. It is the structural argument of an entire book I wrote called The Modeling Mind, and today I am going to walk you through 11 specific evidence-backed truths from that book, one for each of its 11 chapters. Every claim traces back to a named study, no hand-waving, no studies show. Actual researchers, actual journals, actual years. Here is what is actually running underneath your everyday life. Number 1, you have spent roughly half your waking life somewhere your body was not daydreaming on the bus, mid-conversation, at dinner, with people you care about, nodding at the right moments while your mind was 3 miles away. In 2010, Harvard psychologists Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert built a phone app that pinged 2,250 people at random moments and asked 3 questions. What are you doing? What are you thinking about? And how do you feel? They published the results in Science. And here is what they found. People's minds were wandering 46.9% of the time, almost half. And it did not matter what activity they were doing. Mind wandering predicted unhappiness across the board. And the strangest part? The system that keeps pulling you away runs on the same blueprint as the AI everyone has been talking about. Number 2, your brain is not a thinking machine. It is a prediction machine, and it is structurally the same as the large language model that wrote your last email reply suggestion. Now, the book is very careful about this claim. Every place I draw the parallel between your mind and an AI system, I flag whether I mean it literally or as analogy. This is not a vibe. It is an architecture claim. Your brain runs a modeling engine. It predicts your perception, your emotions, and your decisions before the conscious you catches up. The same way a predictive system generates an output before you would call it a thought. The difference between you and GPT is not the architecture. It is that GPT gets to stop training. You never do. Number 3, you have never seen reality. You have only ever seen the desktop icons. What you experience as the world is a layered render. Raw signal gets processed through chemistry, through neurons, through pattern recognition, and by the time it reaches your conscious experience, it has been polished into something your mind calls real. The same way a computer user mistakes the icon on their screen for the actual file it points to. Donald Hoffman at UC Irvine calls this the interface theory of perception. His fitness beats truth theorem shows mathematically that evolution selects for useful interfaces, not accurate ones. You do not see truth, you see what keeps you alive. So the next time you feel completely certain about your read on a person or a situation, ask yourself, am I looking at the file or the icon I cached for this a long time ago? Number 4, there are 2 processes sharing your skull, and most days only one of them talks. One is the narrator. It generates the running stream of thoughts you call me. The other is the observer, the part that can watch the whole show without narrating it. Most people never consciously meet the second one. This maps onto established clinical frameworks. Cognitive diffusion in acceptance and commitment therapy. What Richard Schwartz's internal family systems calls capital S self. Different cartographers, same territory. Here is a 20-second experiment you can do right now. Notice your breathing. Do not change it. Just notice it. Then ask, who is noticing? Whatever answered that question is the observer. It may be coming online for the first time today. Number 5, you can hold a job, raise kids, finish a PhD, fall in love and get divorced, and never once be behind the wheel. I call this NPC mode in the book, and I borrowed the image from Tesla's own driver asleep problem. The car holds the lane perfectly while the driver is unconscious. From the outside, you cannot tell the difference between a driver who is awake and one who is not. The car drives the same either way. That is what your autopilot does. It runs your career, your relationships, your daily decisions, and it does it well enough that nobody notices, least of all you. Psychologists Jonathan Smallwood and Jonathan Schooler found something counterintuitive in 2007. Mind wandering itself does not degrade your performance. What degrades your performance is mind wandering without knowing you are doing it. The autopilot only becomes a problem when nobody is watching it run, and that is the default state for most people, most of the time. Number 6. People who are genuinely awake look exactly the same as everyone else from across the room. This is one of the biggest misconceptions about awareness. Waking up is not a lightning bolt spiritual event. People with the observer online still laugh, cry, get angry, and make mistakes. The difference is entirely internal. It is whether something registered the experience happening, not whether the experience itself changed. James Gross's emotion regulation research, published in 2002, found that reappraisal, which means changing how you interpret an experience, produces better outcomes than suppression, which means stuffing the experience down. People who are awake are not numb. They are not suppressing anything. They feel fully. They just are not fooled by the performance anymore. Number 7. Letting go was never about deleting the memory. It is one setting. Turn off autosave. Most people picture letting go as wiping the slate clean, but you cannot delete the cache. You can only change what gets permanently written to it. Matthew Lieberman's 2007 fMRI study found that simply labeling an emotion, just saying "I am feeling embarrassed" out loud, measurably reduces amygdala activity. Separately, Baljinder Sadra's non-attachment scale research found that people who score high on non-attachment are not numb. They are statistically distinguishable from people who suppress emotion. They feel everything. They just do not permanently file every feeling as part of their identity. The technique is embarrassingly simple. Next time something stings, say the feeling out loud in one sentence before doing anything else. That is it. That is the entire move. Number 8. That personality trait you are so sure is just who you are might be, code a 5-year-old wrote to survive recess. Your prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for impulse control and emotional regulation, does not fully mature until your mid-20s. That is not speculation. Caballero and colleagues published this in Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews in 2016. Vijayakumar's team confirmed it in Social Cognitive and Affective Neuroscience in 2014. So here is the uncomfortable implication. Your emotional defaults, the reactions you run on a loop, were written on hardware that had not shipped its most important chip yet. That defensiveness you fall into, that people-pleasing reflex, ask it one question. How old is this response? Because the answer is almost certainly younger than you think. Number 9. Watching a bad pattern without trying to fix it is enough to start rewriting it. This runs against every instinct. The moment most people catch themselves on autopilot, they grab the wheel and yank it. But the book's central mechanism and the central argument of the research behind it is that the first move is not force, it is observation. This is the same mechanism behind the labeling research from number 7, extended further. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, developed by Teasdale, Siegel, and Williams, reduces depression relapse rates not by teaching people to think differently, but by teaching them to notice their thinking. The observation interrupts the loop, not the analysis, not the willpower, the noticing. Pick one automatic pattern this week. Practice catching it mid-execution. Do not fix it. Do not analyze it. Just see it happen. That is the intervention. Number 10. Your life keeps snapping back to the same emotional temperature, like a thermostat someone else set and you do not remember hiring. The raise that mysteriously vanishes back into the same bank balance 6 months later. The lost client that somehow resolves to the same baseline 2 months after the panic. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. Brickman and Campbell described it in 1971. But here is the update most people miss. Ed Diener and Richard Lucas showed in a landmark 2006 paper in American Psychologist that set points are real, but they are not fixed. And Sonia Lyubomirsky's team found that circumstantial windfalls, the raise, the promotion, fade fast, but intentional, deliberate activities move the dial and stay moved. The set point is not your destiny. It is just the last value nobody bothered to recalibrate. Number 11. Once you can finally steer the engine, the only question left is where you have been pointing it your whole life without ever asking. An objective function does not care what it optimizes for. A neural network will learn to recognize cats or generate disinformation with equal enthusiasm. So will you if nobody ever audits the function. Ken Sheldon and Andrew Elliott's self-concordance research, published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, found that people who achieve externally imposed goals get little to no well-being boost from achieving them. That is reward hacking, the human version. Edward Deci and Richard Ryan's self-determination theory names the 3 conditions a genuinely aligned objective function has to satisfy: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. If your goals do not hit all 3, you will achieve them and feel nothing. Write 1 sentence describing what your life is currently optimizing for. Write a second sentence describing what you would want it to optimize for instead. The gap between those 2 sentences is where the rest of the book picks up. 11 truths, 11 chapters, every single one backed by a named study, not a vibe, and every single one comes with a hands-on protocol in the book itself, designed to be practiced on a commute, in a meeting, or lying awake at 2 in the morning when the machine will not stop. I spent years building and investing in artificial intelligence, and at some point I noticed something that changed how I see everything. The architecture of the mind and the architecture of the systems we are building to mimic it are structurally the same. That realization became this book. The Modeling Mind is a 165-page field guide that blends cognitive science, AI, systems thinking, and contemplative practice into one question. What changes when you finally see the engine that has been running you? If anything in this video made you pause, even for half a second, the book goes much deeper. There is a link in the description if you want to keep going. But here is the real question I will leave you with. You have been running this machine your entire life without a manual. Now you know the manual exists. What would you do differently if you could actually read it? I am Leo. See you in the next one.